How America Built Global Financial Dominance. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Money historian, take a look at the wallet in your pocket or the bank app on your phone. Chances are, you're dealing with money every single day. But have you ever stopped to wonder about the story behind the most dominant currency on the planet? The greenback, the buck, the almighty US dollar. How did a piece of paper from a fledgling nation become the bedrock of the global economy? Today, we're going on a journey back in time to uncover the incredible story of the birth of the US dollar and how America built its financial empire. It's a tale of revolution, chaos, brilliant strategy, and a little bit of luck. Let's rewind the clock to before the United States was even a country. The American colonies were a mishmash of currencies. You'd find British pounds, Spanish dollars, those famous pieces of 8. You hear about in pirate stories, French libras, and even Dutch gil. Each colony also printed its own paper money. It was, to put it mildly, a chaotic mess. Imagine trying to buy groceries, but the shopkeeper doesn't accept the money from the town next door. This lack of a unified currency was a huge obstacle to trade and created constant confusion. Then came the American Revolution. To fund the war against the British Empire, the Continental Congress started printing its own money, called Continentals. The idea was simple: print money to pay soldiers and buy supplies. But there was a massive problem. This money wasn't backed by anything tangible like gold or silver. It was essentially an IOU from a revolutionary government that might not even exist tomorrow. The British, in a clever act of economic warfare, began printing massive amounts of counterfeit Continentals to flood the market and devalue the currency. The result? Hyperinflation. The value of the Continental plummeted, leading to the famous phrase, "not worth a Continental." This early financial disaster taught the young nation as leaders a painful but crucial lesson. A stable country needs stable money. After winning independence, the Founding Fathers knew they had to fix this monetary mess. Enter one of the most influential figures in American history, Alexander Hamilton, the first Secretary of the Treasury. Hamilton had a bold vision. He believed that for the United States to be taken seriously on the world stage, it needed a strong, centralized financial system. In 1792, Congress passed the Coinage Act. This landmark legislation officially established the United States dollar as the country's standard unit of currency. It also authorized the creation of the U.S. Mint, the institution that would produce the nation's coins. But here's the genius part. The new U.S. dollar was defined in terms of both gold and silver. This was known as a bimetallic standard. $1 was worth a specific amount of silver, and also a specific, different amount of gold. This made the dollar trustworthy. Unlike the worthless Continentals, this new currency was backed by precious metals. People, both at home and abroad, could trust that the US dollar had real, intrinsic value. The Spanish silver dollar, which was already widely used and trusted in the Americas, served as the model for the new US coin. This clever move made the transition smoother, as people were already familiar with the size and weight of the coin. For the next century, the US dollar steadily grew in use and reputation within its own borders, but it was still just a domestic currency. The big player on the global stage was the British pound sterling. The British Empire was the world's superpower, and its currency, backed by the Bank of England and a vast global trade network, was the world's reserve currency. If you were conducting international trade, you did it in pounds. The dollar was a regional player, at best. So, what changed? How did the dollar dethrone the king? The first major shift came with World War I. The great powers of Europe poured their resources into the conflict, spending vast fortunes and going deep into debt, much of it to the United States. America, which entered the war late, transformed from a debtor nation into a major creditor nation. European countries paid for American goods and loans with their gold reserves. As gold flowed out of Europe and into the vaults of the United States, the dollar's backing grew stronger and stronger, while European currencies weakened. The period between the world wars saw more financial instability in Europe. The Great Depression hit the globe hard, but the U.S. economy, despite its own immense struggles, was seen as a relatively safe haven. The final, decisive moment that cemented the dollar's dominance came at the tail end of World War II. In July 1944, as Allied victories seemed certain, delegates from 44 nations gathered in a small town in New Hampshire called Bretton Woods. They had a monumental task: to design a new international economic system that would prevent the kind of financial chaos that had led to the Great Depression and contributed to the outbreak of war. The United States, BD's point, was the undisputed economic and military superpower. It held about 2/3 of the world's official gold reserves. Europe was in ruins, and America was the only country with the industrial capacity and financial stability to lead the reconstruction. At Bretton Woods, a new system was born. The deal was this: other countries would peg their currencies to the US dollar at a fixed exchange rate. The US dollar, in turn, would be pegged to gold at a fixed rate of $35 per ounce. This is the famous Bretton Woods system. For the first time, the US dollar was officially enthroned as the world's primary reserve currency. Central banks around the world started holding dollars instead of gold, because the dollar was as good as gold. You could, in theory, exchange your dollars for US gold at any time. This system ushered in an era of unprecedented global economic growth known as the post-boom. International trade flourished under the stability provided by the dollar, but the system had a built-in tension. As the global economy grew, the demand for dollars grew with it. More and more dollars were being held outside the United States. By the 1960s, there were more US dollars in foreign hands than the US had gold in its vaults to back them up. Confidence in the dollar's convertibility to gold began to waver. The breaking point came in 1971. Facing rising inflation, the cost of the Vietnam War, and dwindling gold reserves, President Richard Nixon made a shocking announcement. Unilateralmente closed the gold window, ending the direct convertibility of the US dollar to gold. This event is known as the Nixon shock. Many predicted it would be the end of the dollar's reign. If the dollar was no longer backed by gold, why would anyone want to hold it? But a funny thing happened. The world didn't abandon the dollar. Why? Because there was no viable alternative. The global financial system was already so deeply intertwined with the dollar that untangling it was nearly impossible. Oil, the lifeblood of industrial economies, was priced and traded in dollars. This created a massive, constant global demand for US currency, a system often called the petrodollar system. International loans, bonds, and trade contracts were all denominated in dollars. The world was, and still is, running on a dollar-based operating system. And that brings us to today. Even with the rise of other major economies and currencies like the euro and the Chinese yuan, the US dollar's dominance persists. It remains the world's primary reserve currency, the main currency for international trade, and a safe haven asset that investors flock to during times of global uncertainty. This exorbitant privilege, as it's been called, gives the United States significant economic and political power. So from a chaotic mix of colonial coins to the worthless Continental, and from Hamilton's brilliant vision to the pivotal moment at Bretton Woods, the journey of the US dollar is a story of how a nation's currency became the world's currency. It's a testament to strategic planning, historical circumstances, and the powerful network effects that can lock a system into place. The next time you hold a dollar bill, remember the incredible history it represents. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into financial history. If you found this interesting, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more stories about how our world works. Let me know in the comments what you think about the future of the dollar. See you in the next video.